I didn't expect anything unusual that Thursday afternoon. I showed up at the community shelter the same way I always did, tired from work, smelling faintly of coffee and dust, and trying to convince myself that volunteering made me feel less alone than I actually was. But the moment I stepped inside, I felt a shift I couldn't name. Later, I would tell myself that I sensed him before I saw him, that maybe my heart recognized something my eyes hadn't caught up with yet. But at the time, all I noticed was an unfamiliar voice telling someone, "Yeah, I can help with that." That voice belonged to Jace Riddick. He was new. Something I learned from the way the older volunteers hovered near him, giving him that mix of interest and approval they only reserve for fresh faces. He had this composed energy about him, the kind of calm confidence that didn't need attention, but received it anyway. I don't know why I stared a little longer than I meant to. Maybe it was the easy way he knelt to pet one of the rescue dogs, or the way the corners of his mouth lifted when the dog licked his hand. Maybe it was something else entirely. Corbin, Melissa, our supervisor, called out, "Good timing. You and Jace can start in the back storage room." The new supplies came in. Jace turned. Our eyes met. It was nothing dramatic. No spark, no music cue, no movie-style magic. But the glance lingered just one blink longer than it should have, and that was enough to unsettle the quiet place inside me where I stored all the things I didn't say out loud. "Hey," he said, offering a small smile. "I'm Jace." "Corbin," I replied, hoping my voice didn't sound as stiff as it felt. "Welcome to the chaos." He laughed softly. "I can handle chaos." I didn't know how true those words were yet. We walked into the back room, dim, dust layered thick on old boxes, and shelves marked with years of half-forgotten donations. I'd worked in that room so many times that I barely noticed its gloom anymore. But Jace looked at it like he was assessing it, mapping it out in his mind, as if he needed to understand the place before he could touch anything. We started sorting through boxes, labeling items, stacking supplies. It was quiet but not uncomfortable. Every now and then, Jace would ask something simple, where the labels were kept, how often donations arrived, whether Melissa always hummed old 80s songs under her breath. Nothing unusual. Then came the moment that changed everything, the moment that, strangely, became our beginning. We heard a sharp crash toward the far corner of the room. A metal shelf had collapsed slightly, one side dipping low, and underneath it, I spotted a trembling brown dog wedged tight in the shadows. The poor thing must have snuck in when the door was open earlier. "Oh, no," I muttered, rushing toward it. "Careful," Jace warned, kneeling beside me. "The shelf is unstable." He tested the frame with his hand. It groaned under the pressure. "We have to get him out," I said. "I'll hold the shelf. You crawl under." I blinked at him. "You sure?" He nodded. "You're smaller. You'll fit." I sighed, dropped to my knees, then lowered myself onto all fours, feeling the cold cement under my palms as I moved slowly under the tilted shelf. Dust coated my hands. The smell of rust clung to the air. The dog whimpered, shuffling backward, scared and confused. "It's okay," I whispered gently. "I'm not going to hurt you." Behind me, I heard Jace tighten his grip on the shelf, bracing himself to hold it steady. His voice came from above, calm and focused. "I've got it. You're safe." Something about those words, simple, steady, spoken without hesitation, settled in my chest in a way I didn't fully understand. Maybe it was the instinctive trust in his tone, or the way he didn't second-guess stepping in. Maybe it was that I hadn't heard someone say "you're safe" in a long, long time. I coaxed the dog toward me, inch by inch. When it finally crawled into my arms, shaking but unharmed, I backed out carefully. "Got him," I said when I cleared the shelf. "Good," Jace breathed, releasing it slowly. "You okay?" "Yeah," I replied, standing up and brushing dust off my jeans. "You?" "I'm good." He smiled again, soft, relieved, real. "You handle that well." "I had backup," I said before I could stop myself. His smile widened just a fraction, and the room felt warmer somehow. We carried the dog to the front, and while the vet tech examined it, Jace and I stood side by side, catching our breath. Something unspoken hovered between us. Not attraction exactly, but a quiet awareness, a shift, a beginning. From that day on, we became an unintentional team. Melissa paired us often because, as she put it, you two work efficiently. But privately, I admitted to myself that I looked forward to the days Jace was scheduled. I noticed things about him without meaning to: the way he pushed his sleeves up, the way he tilted his head when he was curious, the way he always checked the exit door twice before leaving, as if habit had taught him caution. He never talked about his past. Not once. I didn't think much of it at first. Everyone has boundaries. But as the weeks went on, I realized that something about his silence wasn't casual. It was intentional. Still, I didn't push. Instead, I held on to the memory of the moment he had trusted me to crawl under that shelf, and the way he had said, "You're safe," like he meant it. I didn't know yet how wrong I was. About him, about myself, about the safety I thought I'd found. But I remember thinking that day, as we swept the storage room together, some moments don't feel important until later. Some beginnings disguise themselves as accidents. And sometimes, crawling on all fours beneath a broken shelf becomes a first step toward a truth that will break you and remake you. I don't know when exactly it happened. When I started noticing little things about Jace Riddick that no one else seemed to pay attention to. Maybe it was the way he always arrived 10 minutes early, but waited outside until the exact start time. Maybe it was how he carried himself with a quiet strength, like someone who had learned to rebuild himself more than once. Or maybe it was the fact that whenever he laughed, really laughed, one side of his mouth lifted slightly higher than the other. I shouldn't have noticed that, but I did. We fell into routine without meaning to. 2 evenings a week became 3. Sorting boxes became cleaning kennels, which became reorganizing the medical supply closet, which eventually became staying late long after the other volunteers had gone home. The shelter wasn't glamorous. Flickering lights, old tile floors, the smell of disinfectant and dog treats. But those moments would have made it feel strangely peaceful. One evening, we were fixing the loose pipe under the sink. It had been dripping all week, forming a tiny puddle that everyone kept stepping over instead of dealing with. Jace insisted we repair it. "You hold the flashlight," he said, lying on his back and sliding halfway into the cabinet. "Bossy," I teased. His voice echoed from beneath the sink. "Not bossy, efficient." "Oh, so you're efficient now?" "Always been," he said, and I heard a smile in his voice. I leaned down to shine the light where he needed it. His shoulder brushed my knee, just lightly enough to feel like an accident. But accidents don't usually leave a warmth behind, not one you notice. He reached for the wrench, his hand brushing mine, and I felt it. An unexpected jolt in my chest, not dramatic, not overwhelming, but enough that I swallowed to steady myself. "Thanks," he murmured, and those simple words hit me harder than they should have. We finished the pipe project, and afterward, he sat on the floor with his arms draped loosely over his knees. He looked softer like that, relaxed in a way he rarely allowed himself to be. "Do you ever feel like this place makes things quieter?" he asked. "What do you mean?" He looked around the dim room, the half-lit supplies, the silent kennels down the hall, the emptiness that felt safe instead of lonely. "Like you can hear yourself here," he said. "Or maybe you just stopped drowning out the parts of you that need be heard." It wasn't the kind of thing people say casually. "Yeah," I answered quietly. "I get that." He nodded slowly, staring at the floor as if deciding whether to keep speaking. But whatever he was thinking stayed locked away. The silence between us wasn't awkward. It was charged, comfortable in a way that pulls you closer without saying anything at all. We didn't talk about feelings. Not then. But feelings settled into the spaces between our conversations, growing quietly like vines creeping up a wall. Later that week, I found him sitting by Kennel 6 with Silas Ward, an older volunteer. Jace was laughing at something Silas said, the kind of full, unguarded laughter that reached his eyes. I should have been happy seeing him open up. Instead, I felt something twist in my stomach. Jealousy, though I refused to name it. Silas noticed me first. "Corbin, hey, Jace was just telling me about." Jace shot him a quick look. Silas stopped mid-sentence. I blinked. "Telling you about what?" "Nothing," Jace said lightly, too lightly, and that was the first time I noticed it. The distance, the deflection, The small but undeniable shift. Something about Jace didn't match the image I had painted of him. Something was hidden. Something he didn't want me to see. My thoughts were interrupted when the door swung open and Marlo Trent walked in. If Jace was calm sunlight, Marlo was sharp edges and polished charm. Tall, clean-cut, with a grin that looked friendly but didn't touch his eyes. He walked like he belonged everywhere, even in rooms he'd never been in. "Evening, gentlemen," he said smoothly. Jace's jaw tightened. He didn't greet Marlo. He didn't even look at him. But Marlo looked at Jace with the familiarity of someone who knew him well, too well. Someone who had history, and power, and leverage. "So this is a new schedule?" Marlo asked, stepping closer. "You two working together a lot now?" He said it casually, but the implication sat heavy in the air. Before I could answer, Jace stood up abruptly. "We were just finishing up." His tone was clipped cold. Marlo raised an eyebrow. "Relax, Jace. I'm just observing." Jace walked past him without another word. Silas awkwardly excused himself. I followed Jace down the hall. "Hey," I said softly. "You okay?" "Yeah," he replied too quickly. That was tense. He stopped walking. For a moment, the only sound was the hum of the old fluorescent lights. "Marlo and I used to work together," he said finally. "I don't want to talk about it." "Okay," I said gently. "You don't have to." But something in his eyes, something aching and conflicted, made me feel like the conversation we didn't have would eventually matter more than the one we did. Over the next week, I saw Marlo 3 more times. He always showed up unexpectedly. He always looked directly at Jace. And he always smiled that unsettling smile when he glanced between us. "You two seem close," he said once, leaning casually against the wall. "We work well together." I replied, trying to sound neutral. He hummed, the sound too knowing. Jace does that, pulls people in. There was something almost taunting in his tone. Later that night, after everyone left, Jace and I cleaned the kennel hallway together, the silence heavier than usual. "Don't listen to him," Jace said finally. "Why would I?" I asked, but he didn't answer. He just kept mopping, jaw tight, shoulders tense, eyes distant. And for the first time, I wondered if the person I was growing attached to might be carrying pieces of a life he wasn't ready to share. Pieces that could hurt me. Pieces that already had. I didn't know it yet, but Section 2 was the last time things felt simple. The last time I believed that slow burn was the whole story. The last time I trusted what I thought I saw. Because after this, everything would begin to unravel, piece by piece, word by word, truth by truth. And it would start with the one thing I didn't want to admit. I was falling for him. And that meant he had the power to break me. I didn't intend to follow Jace after he left the shelter that night. But when he walked out with that distant look in his eyes, jaw tight, shoulders rigid, steps too controlled to be normal, something inside me tugged hard enough that I couldn't ignore it. Maybe it was worry, maybe curiosity, or maybe it was a sharp fear that whatever lived behind his silence was about to spill into a reality I wasn't prepared for. Jace didn't drive home. He walked. His pace was quick, purposeful, almost urgent. I kept a soft distance, careful not to seem obvious, and told myself it wasn't spying. It was concern. That was the lie I chose, anyway. He stopped outside a dimly lit cafe, the kind of place people use for private meetings. He hesitated at the door, breathing deeply like someone bracing for impact. Then he went in. I paused outside, feeling a mix of guilt and an instinct that refused to let me leave. Through the window, I saw him slide into a booth. A moment later, Marlo Trent joined him. My stomach dropped. Marlo leaned back casually, but something in his posture was sharp, calculated, almost predatory. Jace didn't meet his eyes. He kept his arms crossed, guarded, as though trying to shrink into the corner of the booth. Even from outside, I could feel the tension thicken in the air between them. I knew I shouldn't watch, but I did. Marlo said something that made Jace flinch, an actual visible flinch. Jace's hands curled into fists, his shoulders tightening before he steadied himself with a slow inhale. He looked like someone cornered, someone replaying a fight he'd already lost once. Then Marlowe placed a folded paper on the table and slid it across. Jay stared at it for a long time, eyes narrowing, jaw tightening, before he finally reached for it with the reluctance of someone picking up a weapon they swore they'd never touch again. And then, it happened. Jace tore the paper into pieces. Marlowe didn't react with anger. He smiled. The kind of smile that said, "I expected this." The kind of smile that meant trouble had only just started. Before I could process any of it, Jay stood abruptly, leaving the shredded paper behind. He stormed out the back door of the cafe instead of the front, and I had no choice but to circle around quickly if I wanted to catch him before he disappeared into the dark. When I reached the alley, he was there, leaning against the wall, breathing hard, running his hands through his hair like he was trying to scrub something out of himself. "Jace," I said quietly. He froze. Then slowly he turned his head toward me, his expression tight and exhausted. "What are you doing here, Corbin?" I saw you leave fast. I was worried." He scoffed softly, not angry, not mocking, just tired. "You shouldn't follow me," he said. "Then tell me why you look like someone just threatened you." He closed his eyes, shoulders sinking. "It's not your problem," he whispered, "but it feels like it is." He looked at me then, not with warmth, not with the softness I'd grown used to, but with something conflicted and complicated, like he was standing on both sides of the door and didn't know which way to open it. "You don't know me," he said. "I'm trying to. That's the problem." My breath caught. Something about the way he said it, quiet, pained, felt like a confession and a warning tangled into one. The alley wasn't loud, but it was full of all the words we weren't saying, all the questions I didn't know how to ask. What did Marlowe want? I asked softly. For a moment, I thought he wouldn't answer. Then he laughed, a hollow, defeated sound. "Marlowe always wants something. That doesn't tell me anything. It tells you enough." I stepped closer, not touching him, just trying to be present in the gravity he was sinking under. "Let me in," I whispered. His breathing changed, shallow, uneven. "It's not simple," he said. "There are things I've done, things I walked away from. He wants me involved again." "Involved in what?" Jay shook his head. "Not here. Not tonight." Then when he pressed his lips together, swallowing whatever truth tried to climb out. "I need time," he finally said. "Time for what?" "To figure out if telling you will ruin everything." His honesty hit me like a blow, because everything in his tone, the strain, the hesitation, the fear, told me this wasn't about some petty argument or old workplace drama. It was bigger, uncomfortable, dangerous in a way I didn't understand. And yet I didn't step back. "Whatever you're dealing with," I said, "you don't have to deal with it alone." He stared at me like he wasn't sure whether to believe me or run from me. Then, slowly, he pushed himself off the wall and stood straight, putting a careful distance between us. "I should get home," he murmured. "I'll walk with you." "No." Firm. Final. Not rude, just scared. "I need space tonight." I nodded because forcing him would only push him farther away. "Okay," I whispered, "but don't shut me out." His expression cracked just slightly, just enough that I saw a flicker of something vulnerable beneath it. "I'm trying not to," he said. Then he walked away, his silhouette dimming under the weak streetlights until he turned a corner and disappeared. I stayed in the alley long after he left, staring at the scraps of paper Marlowe had thrown into the dumpster behind the cafe. The wind shifted, and a few pieces fluttered toward me. I kneeled and picked up one of them. Only a fragment of handwriting remained. No more chances, and suddenly my chest tightened. Whatever Jace was tangled in, it wasn't small, it wasn't casual, and it sure as hell wasn't harmless. When I finally walked home, the streets felt different, quieter, colder, like the city itself was holding its breath. I replayed everything I'd seen, everything Jace had said, everything he'd refused to say. There, in the lonely echo of my footsteps, I realized something unavoidable. I wasn't just falling for him anymore. I was falling into him, into his silence, his conflict, his past, and whatever storm Marlowe represented. And storms don't stay still. They move, they grow, They hit. I didn't expect to see Jace the next morning. Not after the tension that had carved itself into his voice. Not after the way he'd walked away like each step was a decision he barely controlled. But there he was when I arrived at the shelter. Sleeves rolled up, hair pulled back messily. Feeding the dogs with focus so sharp it looked painful. He didn't notice I was standing there until I set my backpack down. When he finally glanced at me, his expression flickered. Surprise, hesitation. Something weary but undeniably relieved. "You're early," he said, voice low. "So are you?" He nodded once, as if acknowledging that neither of us believed this was a coincidence. We started working side by side in a silence that felt too careful, too measured. His movements were controlled, almost rigid. But beneath the surface, I sensed something else, an agitation he was trying to hide, like static humming under his skin. After a few minutes, he finally spoke. "You didn't have to come in today. I work here," I reminded him. "And even if I didn't, I would have checked on you." He paused mid-motion, fingers tightening around a scoop of kibble. "That's what scares me," he murmured. My chest tightened at the confession, soft and unexpected, like a door creaking open in a house you thought was empty. "Then let me help," I said. He shook his head. "You can't, because you won't let me." This time he met my eyes, not with anger, with exhaustion, with something like hope buried under a layer of fear. "You don't know what you're stepping into," he said. "Marlowe isn't—" He stopped, catching himself. "He isn't safe. I finished for him." Jace inhaled sharply, not because the statement surprised him, but because it confirmed the fear he was trying to outrun. Before he could respond, Ms. Rowan called for my help at the front desk. Jace stepped aside, giving me space, but his expression remained tight, like whatever he wanted to say was lodged in his throat. When I finished assisting, I found him in the supply closet, reorganizing shelves that didn't need reorganizing. He was pretending to be busy, but every line of his body screamed avoidance. "Jace," I said softly. "Talk to me?" He exhaled, leaning against a metal rack. "I shouldn't have let you see that last night, but I did. And now you're in the middle of something you don't understand. Then explain it. It's not that simple. Everything with you is not that simple. Maybe it's time something is." That hit him. His gaze faltered. For a long moment, he didn't speak. Then, slowly, he closed the closet door, so we were alone in the muted light of the narrow room. Marlowe and I. He stopped, searching for the right words. We were close. My chest tightened, not with jealousy, but with the realization that whatever this was had nothing to do with romance and everything to do with damage. "He wasn't good for me," Jace continued. "I knew it from the beginning, but he had this way of making you feel seen and trapped at the same time. So what changed?" I walked away. The simplicity of his words didn't match the weight they carried. "But he didn't let go," Jace added quietly. I felt my pulse rise. "He still wants you involved. In something I should have never touched in the first place." There it was, the shadow that kept following him. I didn't know the details, but the edges were sharp enough to understand the danger. "Is he threatening you?" I asked. Jace hesitated, and that hesitation was answer enough. "He can make things difficult," he said at last. "For you? For anyone close to me?" The message landed hard. He wasn't pushing me away out of indifference. He was pushing me away out of fear. "Jace," I stepped closer, but I didn't touch him. "I don't scare easily." "This isn't about courage," he whispered. "It's about consequences." Then we faced them together. His breath hitched, barely noticeable, but echoed louder than any spoken word. Before he could respond, the shelter door chime rang sharply, echoing down the hall. Footsteps approached, heavy, confident, deliberate. Jace stiffened. I didn't need to see the man to know exactly who it was. When Marlowe Trent appeared in the doorway of the supply hall, the air seemed to constrict. He wasn't loud or threatening. He didn't even smile this time. He simply stood there with the self-assuredness of someone who believed he had a claim to whatever he wanted, including Jace. His gaze flicked between us, assessing the distance or lack of it. "You didn't answer your phone," Marlowe said to Jace. "I didn't want to talk." "You rarely do when guilt kicks in." Jace's jaw tightened. Leave. Marlowe stepped inside the narrow hallway as though he owned it. I tried being polite, he said, but you tearing up that notice last night was a mistake. What notice? I asked. Neither of them answered. Marlowe looked at me then, not curious, not surprised, but amused. A small, knowing smirk curled at his mouth. New friend, he asked lightly. I stayed quiet. Jay stepped forward, blocking Marlowe's view of me entirely. Don't involve him. Then stop giving me reasons to. The temperature in the hall seemed to drop. Jace exhaled shakily. What do you want, Marlowe? Your attention, Marlowe said. Your cooperation. And your signature. Not happening. Marlowe's expression flattened. Everything has a price, Jace. You know mine. It was the first time I saw true fear flicker across Jace's face. But the moment he sensed me noticing it, he masked it with defiance. We're done, Jace said. Whatever you think you have, it's nothing. Marlowe stepped closer, his voice dropping to a near whisper. You and I both know that isn't true. Then he turned and walked out, the echo of his footsteps fading slowly, deliberately, like a warning. When he was gone, Jace pressed a hand against the wall and lowered his head, shoulders trembling with restrained frustration. I'm sorry you had to see that, he said. I'm glad I did, I replied. Now you can stop pretending this isn't real. He lifted his head, eyes raw, conflicted. I don't want you hurt. I'm already involved. Not because of him, because I care about you. He opened his mouth, closed it again, searching for a response that didn't exist. The space between us felt charged, fragile, and undeniably intimate, carrying every unsaid truth. We'll figure out, I said. He breathed out slowly, a surrender, or maybe a trust he didn't know he was capable of giving. Okay, he whispered. It wasn't a promise, but it was a beginning, a fragile beginning in the middle of a storm. I didn't sleep the night before the showcase. My mind kept looping the same images. Cade's face after I confessed what happened at the cabin, the storm in his eyes, and the question he didn't let me answer. But beneath all the noise, one truth stayed steady. Whatever came next, I needed to face it with him, not run from it. When I reached the hall an hour early, the place was still quiet except for the low hum of the air system. Rows of chairs waited like silent witnesses. The stage lights glowed faintly, warming the edge of the wooden floor where I would speak later. I kept pacing the side aisle, feeling like something in me had been left unfinished, like my heartbeat kept skipping ahead of my steps, out of sync with my body. I didn't hear Cade come in until his footsteps echoed softly on the polished tiles. I turned and froze. He looked tired, as if he, too, had wrestled with sleep and lost. But there was a determination in his posture, a steadiness that made the air shift between us. We need to talk, he said. I nodded. Yeah, we do. He motioned toward the edge of the stage, and we sat with deliberate distance between us. Not far, but not close enough to pretend nothing had changed. Cade took a breath. I thought I was angry at you, he said, but I realized I was angry at myself, because I thought we were done lying. I thought you trusted me enough not to hide when you were hurting. My stomach tightened. I didn't hide because I didn't trust you. I hid because I didn't trust myself. I thought you'd think I wanted him, that I invited what he did, and part of me just wanted to forget the whole night existed. Cade rubbed a hand across the back of his neck. I don't care about what he thought he was doing. I care about what it did to you. The sincerity in his voice cracked something inside me. But before I could respond, he added, I wasn't jealous. I was scared. Scared you'd pull away. Scared I'd lose you before we even had the chance to be real. I turned fully toward him. Cade, I'm not going anywhere. He exhaled shakily, like those words had been the ones he needed the most. But we weren't done, not yet. There was still a truth I hadn't spoken out loud, a truth that felt heavier than anything else. You were the one who changed everything for me. I said quietly, not Vaughn, not the cabin. You, the way you see me, the way you pull me back to myself when I feel like I'm falling apart. I was terrified because I want this so badly. His gaze softened. Then want it, he said. Want me. I'm right here. Something inside me steadied, like the floor finally stopped trembling. But before I could move closer, voices echoed from the entrance as the first set of volunteers arrived, breaking the fragile stillness. Cade stood and extended a hand to help me up. Not dramatically, not theatrically, but like it was instinct. Like reaching for me was already a habit. When the room filled with people, he stayed near, moving equipment, checking lights, pretending to focus on tasks while his eyes kept flickering back to me as if confirming I was still there. And even though we didn't speak again, the distance between us had changed. Something unspoken hummed under the surface, like a wire that had finally been connected. Before the program began, we moved behind the curtain to get ready. The performers whispered final notes to themselves. The stage manager paced with a clipboard. Cade adjusted the mic stand for the last time, his movements precise but tense. When he stepped toward me, I saw the hesitation he tried to mask. "You sure you're ready?" he asked. "No," I admitted, "but I'm going to do it anyway." His mouth curved in the smallest smile. "That's how I know you're stronger than you think." Then, so quick I almost wondered if I imagined it, his hand brushed mine. Not held, not grabbed, just a brief, deliberate touch. And somehow, that touch grounded me more than any speech, any rehearsal, any plan. The event began. My part wasn't until later, but I watched quietly from backstage as students took turns sharing stories. About heartbreak, about growth, about resilience. I didn't miss the way Cade kept glancing toward me from the lighting booth, making sure I didn't disappear into the shadows. When my turn came, my throat tightened. I stepped out under the lights, feeling the heat settle on my shoulders. The crowd blurred at first, a sea of silhouettes. Then I spoke, slow at first, then steady. I talked about silence, not the quiet kind, but the kind that suffocates. I talked about fear, not of someone else, but of myself and the parts one didn't want to face. I talked about trust, not as a promise, but as something rebuilt piece by piece. I didn't mention the cabin. I didn't mention Vaughn. I didn't even say Cade's name. But when I spoke about the person who helped me find my voice again, I knew exactly where my eyes drifted, and I knew he understood. When I finished, the applause washed over me like a warm tide. But the real moment came later. After the hall emptied and we were alone again, the lights dimmed, and the silence between us felt different, full instead of heavy. Cade approached me slowly, as if giving me time to step back if I needed to. "I didn't. You were incredible," he said. "I didn't fall off the stage," I replied. "I'm calling it a win." He smiled, but it didn't quite reach his eyes. Something deeper lingered there. Hope mixed with worry, the kind you feel right before you step across a line that can't be uncrossed. "Cade," I said, my voice lower now, "we're not done talking. There's still something unresolved." "I know." His tone softened. "But we can finish that conversation when you're ready." I held his gaze. "I'm ready now." He hesitated, not out of fear, but out of respect. And before either of us spoke again, the stage lights flickered once and went dark, leaving us in a faint, warm glow from the exit sign. The kind of half-light where truths feel closer, edges blur, and the next choice hangs between two breaths. It was the first moment all day where I felt the ground beneath me settle, because I knew what came next would change everything. Again. But this time, it would be because we chose it. After the lights dimmed and the hall fell into that soft, echoing quiet that only follows a crowd, I felt the weight of everything settle differently. Less like pressure, more like clarity. The exit sign cast a muted glow across the stage, outlining Cade's face in warm red. He was studying me, not with suspicion or hesitation, but with a kind of quiet resolve that made my pulse stumble. For a moment, neither of us moved. It wasn't awkwardness. It was awareness, the kind that threads the air, waiting to break only when one of us chooses to let the moment change shape. "We should finish the conversation we started earlier," I said. Cade nodded slowly. "Yeah, we should." He came a little closer, each step measured, like he didn't want to intimidate me or rush me. It was one of the things I'd come to rely on, his ability to approach gently even when everything between us felt sharp. "Earlier," he began, "I wasn't sure what you wanted. I wasn't even sure what I wanted. I just knew I didn't want to lose whatever this is." The sincerity in his voice forced my breath to steady. "And now?" I asked. He exhaled, the sound soft enough that it didn't echo. "Now I'm scared of wanting too much." My chest tightened, not painfully, but with a heat I couldn't ignore. "We've already crossed that line," I said quietly. "Both of us." He searched my face, as though he wanted to make sure he wasn't misreading me. "Then tell me what you want." The question felt like opening a door I'd held shut for months. I stepped closer. Not much, just enough that I could feel the warmth of him. "I want something honest," I said. "Something that isn't built on fear or misunderstandings. I want you to know that what happened at the cabin didn't break me. It just made me realize how much I needed someone who actually sees me." His breath hitched, not dramatically, just enough that I noticed. "And you think that's me?" "I know it's you." Cade looked down for a second, as if grounding himself, then back up with a steadiness that matched my own. "Then you need to understand something, too," he said. "When I told you I wasn't angry at you, I wasn't lying. But I was angry at the way I handled everything. I didn't ask the right questions. I didn't protect you when you needed space." "You did," I said softly. "By being here, by not walking away." He shook his head. "No, I stayed, but part of me still expected you to disappear. And I hate that I let fear dictate the way I looked at you." The admission wrapped around me like a thread pulling tight, and yet it didn't suffocate. It made the moment feel honest in a way that left no room for anything except truth. I took a deeper breath. "Then maybe we can try again, not as two people terrified of messing up, but as two people who finally understand what we're risking." His eyes softened. "You're not risking anything alone." Something in those words settled the last fracture between us. We stood in the dim hall, surrounded by the remnants of the night. The faint scent of warm stage lights, the hum of the building cooling, the hush that wraps places meant for performance when the audience is gone. It felt like the world had paused long enough for us to take the step that had been waiting since the first moment our paths crossed. Cade lifted a hand, slow enough for me to pull away if I wanted. When I didn't, his fingers brushed my jaw lightly, tracing a path that felt like an apology and a promise at the same time. "You don't know how long I wanted to touch you like this," he murmured. "I think I do," I whispered, "because I wanted the same." The closeness wasn't rushed. It was deliberate, built slowly from every moment we held back. He leaned in just enough for our foreheads to touch, an intimate, grounding contact that carried more meaning than anything reckless could. "I don't want to rush you," he said, his voice low. "I don't want to take advantage of the fact that things feel complicated right now." "You're not rushing me," I said, "and nothing about this feels complicated. It feels overdue." His exhale trembled just slightly, and when he spoke again, his tone deepened. "Then tell me something, Jonah. Are you choosing this? Choosing us?" I didn't hesitate. "Yes." The word hung between us with the weight of a decision that couldn't be undone and didn't need to be. Cade closed the final inches between us and kissed me. It wasn't rough or desperate. It was slow, intentional, like he wanted to memorize the shape of the moment. His hand slid to the back of my neck, steadying me, grounding me. I leaned into him without thinking, without fear, without the familiar instinct to guard myself. When we finally pulled apart, his forehead still rested against mine, his breath mixing with mine in the quiet. "I'm not letting fear ruin this again," he said. "Good," I replied, "because I'm not running anymore." He smiled, small, real, and warm in a way that made the entire night feel worth every painful moment that led here. Before either of us could speak again, a janitor's cart rattled into the far end of the hall. We stepped apart instinctively, but something had changed. The tension wasn't sharp anymore. It was connected, steady, alive. "We should go," Cade said, a quiet laugh in his voice. "Yeah," I said, "but not separate?" He held my gaze. "Not separate." We left the hall together, walking side by side into the cool night air outside the building. The campus was quiet, the sky washed with the faintest glow of distant city lights. For the first time in weeks, the world didn't feel heavy. It felt open. It felt like the beginning of something neither of us had allowed ourselves to imagine until now. And as we reached the parking lot, Cade bumped his shoulder into mine gently, almost playful. "Tomorrow," he said, "we figure out the rest." "Tomorrow," I echoed. But even as we went to our separate cars, I knew something with absolute certainty. Tomorrow wasn't the start. This was